We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. Richard Gershman's with us this morning. He's a professor at Belmont with a long history in the movie and TV business. A professor there teaching that field now, which I imagine is just terrific courses. Really appreciate you coming on this morning. Talking about what a lot of people still continue to follow, the investigation into that fatal shooting on that movie set in New Mexico. Some of the very latest, I mean, they keep saying, authorities, that they have not ruled out the possibility of maybe some criminal charges being filed as they continue to look into it. I think that some of the new disturbing things coming out is that there are reports, the LA Times reporting this morning, that there had been some other misfire or firing mishaps involving weapons on the set prior to this occurring, the details of how those played out. Another thing is that during breaks, and maybe you can talk about this, there are down times while sets are being set up and such. There are reports that some of the crew would go out there in the middle of a desert kind of there in New Mexico and were taking some of the weapons and doing target practice with real live ammo, some of which was being kept in the same area as the dummy or blanks. Now that to me is mind-boggling if that was occurring. That is blatant stupidity, if that's in case true, right?
Yeah. Now, again, we don't know for sure, but I've read those reports as well. And, those guns should be totally segregated as prop weapons and not used for personal or recreational use.
Right.
And the fact that that may have occurred is, again, just a huge lapse in judgment. And that is most likely the way that live rounds got mixed in with the dummy rounds or fake rounds that, are what would be used on a set.
Something like
that must have happened. And to not segregate those weapons. There is a safe apparently on the, from what I read, where they're kept, so that they're protected, not available to everybody, and that's where they should be when they're not physically on the set. To take them out, during a break in the day is just nuts. It's not like, I've shot on golf courses and, during the break people go out and hit golf balls. It's a little different.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, I can see there's things you're going to do to kill time.
Right.
But not with a weapon against. Would there be, in your mind and maybe in your experience, any circumstance ever whereby there would actually be live rounds used in a shoot?
Not really. I think they should never be on a set. In my mind, and I've never experienced this, I could see a small second unit that's picking up insert shots where they go and they want to see a bullet hit something.
Yeah, like in a shooting range or something in a structured setting, right?
Very structured, again, with all kinds of safety protocols. So, and obviously films that are not fictional documentaries or whatever, where you might photograph a real bullet hitting something. But again, in this context, no, there should never be a live round.
So talk a little bit about just in the film industry, and maybe as it relates to TV, I know you've done a lot of that as well, but what is the hierarchy here? I know budget comes into play, there's a different level of staffing, but who ultimately is responsible for making sure that these types of things are dealt with properly? You mentioned the armor, and they all have their individual tasks, but who is supposed to set the tone for a set? That something like this doesn't happen and that things, I'm the one making the call here.
Right. Well, to answer your last question, yes, first AD really is given that responsibility to create a safe set and to follow those protocols and to make sure everybody works in a safe manner. Safety is always the responsibility of everybody, right? Everybody's vigilance is necessary. There are safety meetings held, and one of those instructions are, if you see something unsafe, please tell somebody, tell your boss, your crew boss, or give it to the assistant director department and it will be addressed. So a set can be inherently dangerous, right? There's ladders, there's scissor lifts there's all kinds of electricity being used. So even in a normal setting, there are dangers there that people have to be aware of. And when you're working quickly, that's when people can get hurt. And we are working quickly on a set all the time because of the pressure of how much money is being spent and the fact that time is limited, even though it appears to some people in the IA crew, truthfully, that there's no end to a day if the production decides to keep shooting. That was one of the main bits of contention in the latest negotiations.
Right.
So that's a factor as well. But it really is everybody's responsibility. And as I was saying, I think in the break, at this point, all union members have to go through safety training. That didn't exist when I started many years ago. And that's a requirement to be employed. So there's some basic training now for each individual, depending on their area and what they handle. But you set the protocol through safety meetings. When you're doing anything like this, where a gun's coming on the set, or there's a stunt, or there's pyrotechnics, or there's any added danger, you're going to call a separate meeting. We were talking about Lost a little bit. I did a season of that in Hawaii, and that was a show for me that had the most probably of those elements of anything I worked on. Almost every episode had something going on: car crash, lighting somebody on fire, flaming arrows, gunshots, squib heads, explosions.
Yeah.
It was kind of endless. So we did a lot of those meetings, but they're necessary when you have those elements working to keep people safe.
And it works, obviously, because there are so many programs, and like Lost, you didn't have a problem.
No,
You know, it worked.
right.
It worked. But I do wonder, and I've been around some sets, and you've obviously been in the hierarchy on a lot of major productions, but there is a certain intimidation level. I just wonder how sometimes, especially when you talk about how every take costs money and there's time pressures, how some of the lower staff, the grips and all those, especially when you have movie stars walking around and high-powered directors, how comfortable they may be speaking up when they see something that they think is unsafe.
Yeah.
And you may say, well, of course you're going to do it, but trust me, folks, if you've been on some of these sets, and I have, it can be a little intimidating, and you're like, well, is it my place, or are they even going to listen to me, or am I a rabble-rouser, and I've worked my butt off just to get on this set to get a job, and they're going to say, you know what, this guy complains, let's get him off here. I'm just curious how that works. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely, yeah. No, for sure. I mean, first of all, there are a lot of egos on film sets.
Right,
You know,
sure.
so that starts with that. There is a lot of pressure, and the lower the budget, the more corners are likely to be cut. And it does sometimes, it takes a certain amount of gumption to step up and say, no, this is not okay. You know, I've had a couple incidents where I was pushed in that regard. I remember one, we're on the back lot of 20th Century Fox, and we were doing a rather big shot for a TV series. We had a building on fire. We had real firemen there with equipment, spraying water. We had a stunt guy jumping out of a second-story window, landing on an airbag, and Ritter fans going. Ritter fans are really loud fans to create wind and noise.
Oh, okay.
So I had a bullhorn. We rehearsed a number of times so everybody knew what they were doing, which is one of the keys to safety.
Rehearsal.
Rehearsal. Now we're ready to actually do the film. And there's a sequence you would start up. You'd start with the flame going, then you'd add the water, then you add the fans, because at that point you can't hear anything. Then you roll 4 or 5 cameras, and you yell background, and finally the director yells action, or he may defer to a stunt coordinator or even the AD. So I'm going through the whole process, and in the middle of it, the director grabs the bullhorn and starts yelling, higher on the flames, because he didn't like the height of the flames, right? And I was like startled for a second, and then I grabbed bullhorn back and I yelled, cut. Well, I was not his best friend that day, but I had to say to him, you know, the one thing we don't want to create is chaos. If you don't like the way it looks, fine, let's cut the shot and fix it, and we'll do it again.
Right.
But in the middle of it, we don't need to hear that kind of panic.
Yes, right.
So,
but that's a great example. And you had, you know, the experience and the wherewithal to say this, and this is the director who's, I guess, ultimately maybe in charge on a lot of the way it looks.
Yeah.
So you could pull that off because you perceived it potentially as a danger.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always say when we do a stunt, you know, it's okay. The stunt coordinator can call cut if he feels anything dangerous. So can the AD. Anybody who really spots something they feel is dangerous, just yell cut. It's only film.
Yeah,
we forget that a lot of times. We're only making a movie.
You're only making a movie. Again, though, it's expensive. But I think the general public has a. I think justifiably so, thinking that most sets are safe. The Santa Fe County District Attorney, Mary Carmack, you know, says that she was shocked, completely astonished when she first heard about this on the set. And she said, you know, she got these text messages, you know, and she was under the impression that movie sets were safer and more protected. Is that fair to say? I mean, that they're not? I think they are. I mean, Alec Baldwin, in his brief little impromptu interview over the weekend, basically said, I don't know if it was 1 in a billion or 1 in a trillion situation here that happened. Do you agree with that, or do you think now, of course, there are calls about reviewing how they do things? It needs to be safer. Are things changed with technology, the way we shoot stuff?
Well, I think movie sets are safe in general because there is attention to that, and you know, these accidents are not. Considering how many hours of filming there is in every day, you know, I think these kind of accidents are very unique in that way. At the same time, that's why you have to monitor safety, because they are potentially environments in which things can go wrong, or in which you're encountering things that potentially are dangerous, as we were talking about, even just things like electricity, and if it starts raining, or you know, ladders or scissor lifts, you know, going up in the air, and people do lose sight of the safety issues sometimes when they're working quickly. But I think inherently they are safe. And and it's just an incredibly tragic, occurrence.
It is. Listen, let's take a break on that note. We'll come back with more right after this. Stay with us.
This is a Storm 5